But I think we're in a good spot now. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited that all of you are here, and I'm here to present some really cool things that I work on a daily basis, and the work of so many talented engineers as well. So my name is Aditi Joshi. I work in the core ML group at Google Cloud. This is my LinkedIn QR code. If you want to make sure, if there's any questions that you have afterwards, make sure you reach out to me, because there's a lot of material that I'm going to be covering. So if you want like specific links or like videos or research papers or articles, I'm happy to send them over. And the reason why I give my QR code is I have a really common name, believe it or not. So when people search me on LinkedIn, they always send it for some reason to the wrong Aditi Joshi. So that's why if you want to just make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn by using my QR code, or you can just go to aditi.ai. That's my website. That'll take you right into my LinkedIn profile as well. And that's not an AI, that's actually me. Okay, so thank you for coming. What I wanted to talk to you today about is don't be intimidated by all of the different things that you're hearing when it comes to AI. You're hearing a lot of like frameworks and principles, and it just sounds like a lot of information that's coming your way. The goal is it's totally doable, and you have the tools today to be able to make it happen. Sam Altman said, that one person could actually create a unicorn, $1 billion company. And that is actually true. You don't need a large team to be able to come up with a unicorn idea, $1 billion company. That's absolutely feasible today. Or you could do it with a small team, like 3 to 5 people. I do a lot of advising for startups, especially for Google for Startups. I do advising with Techstars. One of the things that I was telling the team is, you have 3 to 5 people, and you have about 10 to 12 weeks when you're in part of the accelerator, but that is sufficient time to be able to come up with an MVP and take it all the way to product market fit, right? You don't need PhDs. You don't need really a lot of computer scientists who have bachelor's and master's and a whole bunch of degrees, because the tools that are available today really do help you make that happen. And that was the same message in Miami Hack Week, talking to them about the fact that you might just have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just a week, a couple of days to work on it, but that is going to be sufficient information to be able to do what you need to do. Not only can you come up with an MVP, if you can get an accredited investor to invest in you, Google actually has $350,000 up to $350,000 of Google Cloud startup credits that we can offer as well. So if you want to find out more information about that, like email me, or you can just Google for Startups Cloud, $350,000, and this page will pull right up. And I highly recommend this because, again, Google takes 0% equity on this, and it's a way for you to try out all the different tools that we're going to be talking about in the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm just going to pause to see if there's any questions so far before we get right into it. Okay, one of the things that I talked about in my webinar for DQ is when it comes to product management, things have fundamentally changed in the sense that the pace and the acceleration with which you can develop prototypes, put them out in front of users, is going to accelerate and keeps accelerating. The way that we thought about product management before, and just to give you background, I used to teach product management in New York City for 6 years, and I had thousands of students who gave me a lot of great feedback over the last decade about what I should do better. One of the things that you don't need necessarily is a whole team of UX designers or visual designers, because you can crank out those prototypes very quickly with a small team intact. The fundamentals of getting to an MVP, a minimum viable product, and then getting to product market fit, right, still remains the same, right? So all the concepts that Eric Ries talks about in the Lean Startup, what you learned about business model canvas, all the things that Michael Porter talks about in Porter's 5 Forces, that's still intact. It's just the speed at which you can do that is definitely faster than we've ever seen it. So that mindset shift needs to change, because your startups or your product is just nothing but a set of experiments. So you have to be very disciplined, you have to be very rigorous in that particular approach. And so you need to shift that mindset and realize that everybody else around you is moving at a super fast pace. So leveraging AI, when I gave that webinar for DCubed a few weeks ago, I actually took a decade's worth of notes, and I've got like almost 100 pages of teacher's notes that my students have given me over the time, just feedback based on what I've taught them. And I turned that into a slide deck in minutes, right? Literally took me minutes. I asked Gemini to give me an outline of all of my notes. What are the high-level talking points? And then I said, you know what, now turn that into a slide deck. And I would say it's about 70 to 80% there, right? It's not 100% there. And the great analogy would be like if you're a journalist, you go to your editor, and when the editor sees it, they're like, well, it's like 80% there, but there's that finesse that the editor adds to make sure it's a really stellar New York Times article. That's the best way to think about it, right? So the AI is just a journalist doing a bulk of the work for you, and you're the editor that goes in and makes the tweaks and then really hones it to make sure it's what it needs to be. If you want to learn more about product management and how that discipline has changed, I'm teaching a learning sprint next month as part of D-Cubed. It's all virtual. It's on Tuesdays from 7 to 8 p.m. You're more than welcome to, and we'll go into all of these details into product management, how that's changed from a very deterministic world to a very probabilistic world, more into detail. And then 2 weeks ago, I spoke at MIT, and I talked about the fact that there's another way that product has really changed, that in the fact that TPM skills, technical program management skills, have become even more important than ever before. Because AI product development is inherently very, very uncertain. It's all probabilistic. You have no idea what that AI is going to return to you, right? So making sure if it doesn't perform as expected, which happens a lot, right? The data quality might not be where it needs to be. There's a lot of ethical considerations that need to come into play. That's what a technical program manager does. They help you to mitigate that risk, right? Identify that risk early on, and then make sure that it's systematically de-risking it. That's what a technical program manager does. So those skills are really important as you're building a product feature set, and as you're trying to build that company, or even if it's a feature line within a larger company. And you can watch that on YouTube as well. That was about 2 weeks ago. Okay, so that's my the preface to everything that's happening. So all of those frameworks are still applicable. The speed has changed, just to summarize. And it's all about rapid experimentation, and you don't need large teams anymore. One person can do it really, but even if you have 3 to 5 people as co-founders, you're more than equipped to be able to build that billion-dollar company. Identifying the pain point, making sure that you're getting to an MVP with a solution and really honing in on that value proposition, making sure you're going from a minimum viable product to product market fit, which is the way that Larry Page defines it, it's the toothbrush test, right? So if a product is needed, like a toothbrush, do you use it daily? Like how often do you use it, and is it a necessity? All those principles that are taught here at HBS still remain the same. It's the speed that's changing. Today you learned a lot about generative AI. So I'm not going to go into that. But if you wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper, we do have skills boosts that are free and available to everybody. This is something that you can check out. You can Google it. It'll pull right up. Just type in Generative AI Learning Path, Google Cloud. And these are all free and available to you. So all the things that they are talking about this morning in terms of LLMs and all the different concepts and the frameworks, you can kind of go through it at your own pace. When you think about LLM, how would you really define it? Just to make sure that we bubble it down to its very essence, all it is just a sophisticated autocomplete. That's the way to think about it. It's just a sophisticated autocomplete. There's nothing more to it than that. I mean, there's a lot of complexity, math complexity that goes beyond it, but when you really distill it down, it's just a sophisticated autocomplete. So if you were to put a bunch of poems in there, and you gave it roses are red, it'll come back and say, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Or if you put a bunch of code samples in there, you're going to get a bunch of code that comes back at you. So it's just about how you train it. All of these modern LLMs are incredibly large. They're trained on billions, if not trillions, of parameters. So they're capturing structures that are very complex and the nuances that never before existed. And the reason why we can do that now is because compute is available to us. This is something that wasn't available a few years ago. So compute essentially is really the new oil, and that's, you can see the NVIDIA stock price as a result of that, right? That's kind of like the result of the fact that all of this is powered by compute in the back end. All the classical natural language problems from entity extraction, making sure classification is done, the summarization, sentiment analysis, all of that is feasible with the amount of compute that's available to everybody through either a cloud provider or if you wanted to do in alternative ways, that's totally fine. And it's become so sophisticated, these large language models, they can even explain jokes. Now, these are like subtleties, right, that someone who might not be a native English speaker might not get, but the LLM actually gets it. So for example, this joke is, I used to be addicted to soap, but I'm clean now. If you look at the LLM, Gemini gets that joke. It'll tell you the nuances behind it, which is unbelievable and it's amazing. Or if you ask it to give 5 ideas about science fair projects, all of that brainstorming, that creative thinking that we used to do, an LLM can do it for you. So why are they so different? Like, what's happening? One of the things to think about is this emergent abilities that you're seeing. And so that's why people are worried. They're thinking that Skynet is going to happen. And I'm here to tell you, I'm actually super excited, right? I think it's going to make us even more efficient than ever possible, right? So that's why I know people are like, there's like doomsday folks. They're like, oh my gosh, where Skynet is on its way. I'm on the Jan LeCun side, right? He used to say, what are we worried about? We're ways away from getting there. Let's make sure that we're taking all of these tools, these really cool stuff that these LLMs can do, and make sure it helps us to find those patterns and make us more efficient than ever before. And LLMs allow us to prototype really, really fast, which goes back to how I started this particular session, which is saying that all of those experiments that you can run to build out that billion-dollar company, to build out that idea, it's totally doable, and you can do it at a pace that you've never done it before with a very small amount of people. If you ask me, Gemini just makes me more efficient at work. So I'll give you an example. I work on open source ecosystems within the Core ML group of Google Cloud. In particular, I focus on OpenXLA. And if you're wondering, like, what does that mean? Think about it as TensorFlow, JAX, and PyTorch are the deep learning frameworks. We sit right in the middle, and we just make sure that different CPUs, GPUs, so NVIDIA servers, Intel, AMD, LPUs, TPUs, you're just much more efficient in terms of how you're accessing those machines and the compute power. So we have an open source ecosystem, and these are all the folks that are companies that have joined in our ecosystem. So I also hosted DevLab at Google about 2 weeks ago, and we had Tesla show up, NVIDIA, AMD, you name it, all of these folks were there. They came from all over the world, and it's a lot of work to do all of that planning. After all that planning was done for OpenXLA, our dev lab, what I had to do was I had to take all of this information and succinctly summarize it. So this is the deck. It's an open source ecosystem. Anybody can join it, so there's nothing like proprietary about this. So what I asked Gemini to do was take all the tutorials, the PDFs, that all of the different partners had put together, summarize it for me, and then put it into a doc, which it did. So I was able to produce a write-up or a summary within minutes. And it was about 70 to 80% there. And the reason why I want to point this out is because OpenXLA, I mean, this is like middleware, right? So this is very deep technical compiler knowledge, right, that not a lot of people have. Forget computer scientists. I mean, they might be computer science majors and PhDs, but this is very deep knowledge that you really need to have, and you need to kind of specialize in it in order to be able to come up with these summaries. But Gemini was able to do it for me up to about 70 to 80%. Then we went in, all of our XLA engineers, and they kind of tweaked it a little bit, right? But a bulk of the work was done for them. So in terms of efficiency, right, I was able to get all of this done within like an hour and get feedback and make sure that I distributed it out. And then I'll present it next week at our open source community meeting that we have so that all the partners can react and kind of give their feedback as well. So I said a lot. I'm just going to pause to see if there's any questions so far. Yes.
So with these large language models and testing out and prototyping businesses, is there a concern that you might start to get a little bit of like conversions on what is recommended back? And then how would you address not just privacy, but also the unique business that you're trying to create, right? The value prop that you want to bring to market.
Yeah, so I was a Berkman Fellow here a few years ago, so I focused on privacy research. I did the same thing at Yale Law, so that security and privacy is like near and dear to my heart. I was also a privacy reviewer at Google. So one of the things that was really important is I had actually veto power over launches. So if I felt like something was violating someone's privacy, or that I had the ability to be able to say, we can't launch until this has been fixed. So to say is that's super important. There are practices in place. There's checks and balances in place at a place like Google because as a privacy reviewer, I couldn't be vetoed. I could actually stop a launch. But having that in place is super important, right? And we also have a privacy framework like that's put together through NIST. So I was one of the contributors of that, where you can actually have, if you're building on a product like that, you can follow the NIST privacy security guidelines and the frameworks that they put together, which is what we did at Google as well. And I was one of the authors to that, so I can tell you, like, it's pretty comprehensive. It gives you exactly the guiding force behind, like, how you should make those decisions, whether something is right or wrong. So that's the first part, the privacy security part. Having the deep knowledge is really important. Whether do they converge on something? What Gemini does, it gives you options for drafts. So it'll give you like 3 different draft options, and then you can go through as like the editor and choose like which one makes more sense, and you can also give it feedback along the way. So it's honing based on the feedback that it's getting from the users. Yes?
Do you think that the exponential growth and the power of these models will continue for a while?
I do. They're going to be enormous, and we're about to get into that. So you literally teed me up.
Enormously powerful.
Enormously powerful. You just teed me up for where I'm about to go. But are there, like, thank you for doing that. But are there like questions before I go that? Like, I love it. Thank you.
In early technology always has bugs to work out, but how do you build trust in a system where you're putting a lot on the line when you're using this tool in your business, in your life? And there was that episode where they had to pull back and reissue because the photographs came out that were out of context because of a push for DEI or whatever. Can you address that? How are we supposed to build trust in a system that we think is doing pure plain algorithms, and yet they seem to have some injection of human bias into them?
Yeah, I think the important part is also the feedback that it's getting, and it's collecting all of that information. When you put a lot of safety guardrails in, so I used to do security engineering before I joined the core ML group at Google. So we work really closely with Mandiant and different folks inside the world of cybersecurity. So whenever you put those guardrails in place, oftentimes the output, it's a lot of math, like complicated math that goes behind it, but the output might not be as accurate because you put those guardrails in place. If I were to remove those security and privacy guardrails, you might get much more of an accurate response. But from a red teaming perspective, and I still go to underground hacker conferences, but like the White House has started coming to those underground hacker conferences because what they're starting to realize is that the more open the model, from a red teaming perspective, the way that a nation state actor can get access to privacy, like individuals, like private information, especially those that may have like security clearances, for example, becomes higher. So whenever you put, so there's that trade-off. Right? When you're putting the safety guidelines in place, the privacy, the security in place, you're going to you're going to suffer in terms of accuracy. But in my mind, that's okay because slowly over time, the model will learn and it'll get better. But again, like when I started the thing, I said it does 70 to 80% of the job for you. As the editor, you have to think of yourself as the editor in chief. Like it's your job, the 20%, to go in and say, is this truly accurate or not? And even with all of this, when I put those summaries together, I still had our XLA engineers go in and say, okay, are these summaries accurate or not? Right? And they went in and made a couple of tweaks, right? But again, a bulk of the work was done for them. And that's how I would view it, that it's doing like, 60 to 80% of the job for you, which is still better than nothing, which is better than where we were like 5 years ago. Does that help? Yes.
But so does that mean that you should not really use this on a topic that you don't know a lot about?
Potentially. It does like B-level work. I think they talked about it this morning where like when the professors are grading it, they're like, it's not an A or an A plus paper. It's like a B or a B plus, maybe an A minus paper, right? And it's only but you're right. The answer is like, if you don't know a whole lot about it, you do need to have those experts go in and fine tune it for you. And that's where the concept of fine tuning comes in, right? And prompt engineering comes in. That's why that field of prompt engineering is so important. So if you're building like a model that's focused on medicine, you do need to have those doctors go in from a prompt engineering perspective and also help you to fine tune it because they can assess and distill down the things that may be inaccurate. Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on the aggregation of different LLMs? In other words,
like a AI talking to an AI?
well, something like that. Like just from a plain old use case, I type something in ChatGPT and I get a pretty cool answer, and I'm thinking, well, what would Gemini say? What would Claude say?
Yeah.
Is there any?
I think you should do that. And when we do the model garden thing, you'll see you can actually take a lot of open models that are made available to you through Claude or Gemma or whatever it is that you choose to use and actually compare and contrast, right? But for that, you need a lot of compute power to be able to do that, which is that $350,000. I kind of started my slide deck by saying that is that you're going to need that much money to be able to test through, and the compute power that's required to be able to kind of figure out what's working for you and not. But you definitely should. You should definitely go through the different models and see which one gives you the response that it gives you. I know it's like we only have 30 more minutes left, so I kind of want to move on if that's okay. And then I can stay after and address a lot of questions if that might help. This is just to kind of point out the fact that Google's been doing this for over a decade. If you remember Google DeepMind AlphaGo, right, that was in the news. It was able to come up with these emergent like plays that had never been like grandmasters had never even thought about that before. And then the other part is remembering the attention all you need paper. Right, so this was something that really kind of revolutionized what we're seeing today, and all of those 8 actually were Googlers, and the paper came out of Google. So we kind of gave birth to our competitors. I think competition is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay, now let's talk about multimodality, which is what you teed me up for. So what's fantastic about multimodality is that multiple models, can they work together, which is kind of what you were trying to ask me. Yes, they can, but the problem is that the signal gets lost between the models. And that's why Gemini, from the ground up, is a multimodal approach. What I mean by that is that the audio input may have like a tone, right? Or like an emotion to it that you can't necessarily grasp with text. And so that's what making sure if a model is multimodal from the ground up, that's what it enables you to do. And that's what Gemini is kind of built to do. It's built from the ground up with that multimodality in mind. So it's working across text, images, video, audio, and even code. There's 3 different Gemini models. There's Ultra, there's Pro, and Nano. So it all depends on your particular use case. So there was a question about like, which model do you use? Well, it also depends on what is the problem that you're trying to solve. So you have to go back to the fundamentals of product management there. Think about what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is that pain point? And what is the solution that you can come up with that addresses that particular pain point? And then iterating and really honing that value proposition. And all of that is what you do as an individual, as a human being, that the models aren't quite there yet. But they can provide you with that toolkit to be able to make it happen. So you can choose to use Ultra, Pro, or Nano, depending on what it is you want to do. What you want to think about is the context window. If you look at like Gemini 1.0, 30K tokens. I mean, that's what they've worked off of. But if you look at Gemini 1.5 Pro, now you're looking at 1 million. Why is that important? Well, now you're looking at an hour video, 11 hours of audio, 30,000 lines of code, and over 700,000 words. That is phenomenal. So I kind of want to show you this particular video, which is really cool. And you can watch, it's only 1 minute long, but I think it's worthwhile looking at it and kind of getting a sense.
An experimental feature in our newest model, Gemini 1.5 Pro. We'll walk through a screen recording of example prompts using a 44-minute Buster Keaton film, which comes out to over 600,000 tokens. In Google AI Studio, we uploaded the video and asked, find the moment when a piece of paper is removed from the person's pocket and tell me some key information on it with the timecode. This screen capture is sped up, and this timer shows exactly how long it took to process each prompt. And keep in mind that processing times will vary. The model gave us this response, explaining that the piece of paper is a pawn ticket from Goldman & Company pawnbrokers with the date and cost, and it gave us this timecode 1201. When we pulled up that timecode, we found it was correct. The model had found the exact moment the piece of paper is removed from the person's pocket, and it extracted text accurately. Next, we gave it this drawing of a scene we were thinking of and asked, what is the timecode when this happens? This is an example of a multimodal prompt where we combine text and image in our input. The model returned this timecode, 1534. We pulled that up and found that it was the correct scene. Like all generative models, responses vary and won't always be perfect. But notice how we didn't have to explain what was happening in the drawing. Simple drawings like this are a good way to test if the model can find something based on just a few abstract details, like it did here. These are just a couple examples of what's possible with a context window of up to 1 million multimodal tokens in Gemini 1.5 Pro.
So I just wanted to show that because when you see it live, it's unbelievable. Let's see if I can find my slide deck.
That is your slide deck.
Did it go into my?
This is
There we go. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so that 1 million tokens, I mean, it's pretty phenomenal what it can do.
Middle of the screen.
It's not working. It's the one problem.
Oh. Can you escape out of full screen? Let's try it. Yeah, no, go to slideshow.
Perfect. Perfect. If you want to find out a little bit more about that, Jeff Dean has a great set of tweets about needle in the haystack tests that you can go ahead and find out, as well as there's a wait list for it. So if you wanted to sign up, please do. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Gemini ecosystem. So far I kind of talked about from a consumer standpoint, which is the top level, what can it do from Gmail and from Docs and how I've used it to summarize all of the information. It gives me an outline, then I can use different add-ons to be able to come up with slides that I needed and how it's made me much more efficient. I want to talk a little bit about the bottom tier, which is for businesses and for enterprise. Let's talk about the Vertex AI component of it. What I want to focus on now is what everybody's talking about, which is the agent builder. How many of you have heard about like conversational agents? Perfect. So I was at dinner, the speaker dinner, and we were talking amongst ourselves, and they were saying, yeah, I have a team that spent like 9 months, and there were about 6 or 7 people who put together an agent, a customer agent. And my response was, this was last year, and my response was, well, now you can actually do it within minutes. And you don't need anybody who understands machine learning or has a computer science degree. It's all done using natural language. So I wanted to kind of show you how simple it was to do it without using any type of a code. Like you don't need to be a software engineer to be able to do that. Someone with absolutely no knowledge, but who understands English and understands their customer base can actually develop a customer agent within minutes. And there's different types of agents that you can build today within Google Cloud, whether it's like a customer agent or an employee agent, a knowledge agent, or a voice agent, whatever it is that you want to do. That end-to-end flow, all of that is actually automated with like 0% development effort from a software engineer.
Hi, my name is Patrick Marlowe, and I am a staff engineer on the Vertex Applied AI Incubator team. And today I'm going to be showing you how to build a conversational agent in just 5 quick minutes using our new product called Vertex Agent Builder. If you are familiar with building conversational experiences, perhaps using our Gemini models or other open source offerings like LangChain, then this video is definitely for you. Okay, let's get started. So this is the new Vertex Agent Builder console. Previously, you may have known about it as Vertex AI Search and Conversation or Vertex AI Conversations. So now you can find it in GCP under the Agent Builder selection. You'll be brought to this screen. So what we're going to do is create a new application today. And we're going to select an application of type agent, which you see on the bottom here. And today we're going to build a Tesla service agent to help users find places to fix their car. Now, when you first create a brand new agent, you'll be greeted with this screen, which shows the default playbook, a default goal, some set of instructions, and there's really no configuration that's done with the agent here yet. But what I want to do is actually show you that you can interact with the agent right away because it is connected to a large language model already. So I can ask, what do you know about the new model X? And we'll see what responds back. It's just the Gemini model, just base information, the training information that it has, kind of boilerplate type response. And I'll take it a little step further from there. Where can I test drive one in Austin, Texas? Now, what's going to happen is that it's going to say it doesn't have real-time information. It can't help us do anything with that. It says it can help us find a Tesla dealership in Austin, Texas, but that's sort of hallucination because it doesn't have access to the outside world right now. So let's go ahead and start to fill this agent out. Let's configure it just a little bit. So first, let's provide it a goal. So you are a friendly Tesla service center agent. Your job is to help users answer questions. Actually, your job is to, let's just say, answer questions about Tesla products. And we'll give it a couple of instructions. You greet the user and answer their question to the best of your knowledge. If the user asks about a Tesla service center location, do not provide information unless you are certain that you know the address. So essentially I'm saying don't hallucinate, please. Because if it doesn't have access to the address information, we don't want to give out false information. So let's go ahead and ask these same questions again. So what do you know about the new Model X? Now, because I provided a persona and some instructions to it, you'll see that the way that the response comes back from the model is slightly different, not so boilerplatey. Where can I test drive one in Austin, Texas? Now, again, what's going to happen here is pretty much going to deny, like, I'm sorry, I don't have information about Tesla service center locations, because we've explicitly said, don't answer this question unless you're certain that you can answer this question. Now, the way that we can actually get our agent to connect to real world information is to use tools. So we have been inside of the agent's interface, if you look at the left-hand bar here. So we're going to go to the tools interface here. And now there are several different tools that we can connect with our agents, but essentially tools allow our agents to access the real world. So you can think of them as connections to other systems. If there's an API interface to that system, you can build a tool to connect to it. So what we're going to do today is build a places search tool. Now we are going to use the tool type called Open API. So this is the Open API specification to define what that API interface looks like. You can also connect data store interfaces, which are vector databases that have pre-indexed information. And you can also do function calling as a tool from Vertex agents. So for this tool description, let's say, a places search API that provides information on points of interest in a city. Now, for the schema, previously to recording this video, I've put a schema together. So I'm going to grab that from another agent and I'm going to drop this in here. So what the schema is, it sort of defines what your interface of your API looks like. Now you'll notice here my server URL actually is connected to a Cloud Run instance that I've deployed, which is a very lightweight Flask application that is getting the service account key and calling the Places API. So really, really simple code behind the scenes. And what we're doing here in the specification is we're saying, as the LLM, you should be collecting this information from the user in order to call that API. So I'll go ahead and save this. Now we have the Places search tool. I'm going to go back to agents. We're going to go back to our default playbook. And what I'm going to do is modify this statement here. So if the user asks about a Tesla service center location, use the tool places search to answer their question. And you'll notice there's a special syntax for linking tools or for linking agents. So you can actually chain together tools and agents, which just makes building multi-agents and multi-tool conversational experiences really, really streamlined. So let's go ahead and save this and we'll run the conversation again. So let's restart this conversation. What do you know about the Model X? We know that about the Model X. Where can I test drive one in Austin, Texas? And what's going to happen this time is that the agent is actually going to use that places search tool, and it's going to get that real-time information and provide it back to the user instead of saying, I can't help you. So if you take a look at this places search tool, you'll notice that the agent filled in the information city and preferences was Tesla service center, and then we actually got real results from the places search API. The model then took that information and summarized it to a nice clean statement for the user. But let's say we don't really like the way that this was formatted at the very end. What we can do is start to provide few-shot examples to guide our model into how we want it to act and respond to the user. So what I'll do is I'll click on default playbook here on the left-hand side. This is going to highlight all of these interactions because this is what happened in this particular playbook. I'm going to hit save example. It's going to bring us to this new interface. Let me just go ahead and give this a name, example 1. And I'm going to keep all of this information because this is a really great model conversation that I want to save as an example for our agent. Now, the last thing I want to do is actually modify this last statement here because I don't like all this jumbled text together. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take out all of this extra text and I am going to reformat this as a bullet list using markdown syntax. So let's just take all of this information out here. Oh, deleted that there. And we'll just save it just like this. And then I'm going to add one more action, so a user utterance that just says great things. And this is just to show the model that the user might respond after you give them the addresses. So let's go ahead and hit create. And of course, let's go back to our main conversation. And if we run this back, you'll see that it does the bullet pointing now, which is really great, right? So where can I test drive one in Austin, Texas? And now it's actually going to follow our example that we gave it. It's going to do some reformatting. It's going to put the bullet point stuff together, which is great. Obviously, you're saying, you know, hey, you said Austin, Texas in the example. It's going to do the Austin, Texas thing over here, of course. But I can follow up and just say, what about, you know, San Francisco? Or what about Vegas? Or what about Dallas? Or what about any other city? But the point is that we're using the context of the full conversation. I don't have to ask these questions over and over again. It knows what information that it needs to pull out to send to that search tool and just kind of redo the conversation and redo the tool call again and again. So really, that's it. In just a few minutes, I've shown you how to build a brand new agent using the Vertex Agent Builder console. We've put together some goals and instructions. We've tested out some of the model responses. We put together some few shot examples, or really just one shot in this example. But in a production environment, you would want to add lots of different examples to show all of the different use cases that you might be building with your agent.
Great. So the reason why I wanted to show that to you is like that you just don't need a big software development team anymore, right? Like you don't necessarily really need to be a coder either, right? Don't need a computer science degree. If you want to find out more, that's the Cloud Next tutorial, and that kind of goes into a deeper sense of what the functionalities are that you can build from it. Okay, now I'm going to take about a few more minutes. I'm going to hand it over to Lucas. I just want to talk a little bit about Gemma open models. So there is a way where we have Gemma that was introduced. It's an open model, but there's multiple ways you can get to Gemma. You can access it through Hugging Face or Kaggle, but that's an open model among others like Anthropic's Claude that you can get access to through the Google Cloud Console. So that's something that I think would be worthwhile for you all to know, but I'll skip it and I'm going to turn it over to Lucas to talk about all the really cool things that you can do in console. And just for background, Lucas is a Google developer expert, so he doesn't work for Google, but he's one of our experts, and we rely on him to go to all of these great events and kind of show people, do a little show and tell about the functionality. So he often gets sneak peeks into Google functionality before it's even out. And then just to remind you all, if you are interested in the Google for Startups Cloud program, the $350,000, it's up to $350,000 of cloud credits. You just need an investor. You need to be pre-seed, seed, or Series A. Let me know if you want to find out more information about it, because all of this great stuff that you can do, you do need compute power to be able to do it.
Thank you so much. Let's make sure I can plug in here.
Aditi, I have a question as
Yes.
I'm plugging in. So when you use open source like that though, so let's say you're building an agent, your information does go up to the cloud though, right?
It depends on, what do you mean? Are you talking about the prompt engineering piece of it?
Well, you're putting in the information, right?
So if it's user information, the way, like nobody has access to your information on Google Cloud, and I can send you all of the information and the documents that we have and the PDFs that we've written around that
So
as
it's
well.
compartmentalized.
Exactly, it's separate, right?
And secondly, there's a RAG tool that people can deploy to see if the model's doing the right things. Does that run real time, or is that separate running behind the scenes if you had a tool like that?
Yeah, you could do that too. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that. But let me address that afterwards. I want to make sure I give him his 15 minutes of time. And then we can talk later too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what I want to do is just show you some of this in action, and that was an excellent demo. We're not going to build an application here together because you just saw that happen. But I'm going to show you some of the real things that you can do today using Gemini. So the first thing I did was I loaded up gemini.google.com this morning, and I gave it this prompt that I was going to be giving a talk today, and I wanted to give a demo to just show people like how they could use Gemini, and could it make me a little outline for the session. So this is what it suggested. It knows the title of the event because I mentioned that in the paragraph. It has the target audience here. There's Harvard Business School folks who are at the Leading with AI event. 20 minutes. And so it says I should start out with a brief introduction of myself and my role at Google. Well, this thing made the incorrect assumption that I work at Google. I could have corrected it, but I don't actually mind assuming that. That's fine. I do spend a lot of time working with Google. I formerly was at the Broad Institute for 20 years, and I started my own consulting business about 1.5 years ago. But I am a Google developer expert, and I run the Google Developer Group for cloud in the Boston area, among other things. So that's my little introduction there. We've already talked about sort of the importance of AI. I think that's probably what you've been talking about all day today, I'm assuming. And you've already seen some of the models and stuff in the slides that we just saw. So, it goes over some of the things that I might want to focus on. This chat interface, which is the part I'm doing now, where I just have a real live interaction with the chat thing. There's interfaces in the different Google Drive apps that I'll show depending on how much time we have. In the Cloud Console, there's a whole interface that if I'm a practitioner of Google Cloud and I'm trying to do something in the web interface, it can help me figure out what I need to do, which things I need to click on, what the different settings mean. And if I'm a developer, which I am, and hopefully AI is not going to completely replace my job, then while I'm actually coding, I get all of that sort of autocomplete behavior where as I'm typing something, it presumes what is going to come, and I can just hit tab and accept the presumptions if they're correct, or I can tweak them and go through, and I can even describe like entire pieces of code that I'd like it to write, put a comment there, and it'll just spit out some code, which is amazing. And as you saw in the demo just now, you can build your own applications and have those using AI in some fashion. So here's an example of this interface, where I can just type something into chat. It's gone through I should tailor the specific use cases to resonate with a business school audience. That's one of the little tips it put in there. That's very helpful. So you can imagine, no matter what you're trying to do, whether you're preparing I'm going on a trip with my family to the Grand Canyon later this year. And so me and my sister and my mom and 3 children. And so I just kind of put in the one event that we had scheduled, and I asked it to plan out a whole trip of all the sort of what you have to do in Vegas before you go to the Grand Canyon and what we're going to do in Vegas after we go to the Grand Canyon. So that's amazing. So then some of the other places where you could use this, like if I'm just making a new Google Doc, I can actually have this thing. You'll see this little help me write prompt that I have here. And I can just tell this, build me a project plan for the project. I think it's going to take 3 weeks and have 2 phases, but, sort of build it out. And it'll build out a whole document for me. Similarly, I can go into Google Sheets, and there's places all throughout Google now where you'll find that you have access to Gemini. So I have this little Gemini icon up here, and now I can ask it, information about something that's going on in the sheet that I'm working in. I can ask it to create a project schedule with all the headings, and I can fill in the rows. Pretty much anything you can think of. Like here, one of the examples it has, create a table for a full day team event. So, I haven't given it a whole lot of information about what we're going to do in this team event. And so let's see if it's able to do anything live here. So there we have a team event. It starts at 7. That's probably not my jam. So I might prompt it back and say, how about we start at 9:30 or something like that. And then, I can interact with it and tell it, well, I think the lunch is probably going to be a little longer, or here's what one of the events are in the afternoon. But instead of starting from a blank sheet, which is kind of the hardest part for me with a lot of projects, I can get something going right away. I was, hiring a consultant to do some work with me. I'm like, I need to have a contract with this consultant. And so I let this thing spit out a boilerplate for me. It's just as good as if I were to go to any old website and download a template or something. But now I can interact with it and say, actually, I don't like the voice in this. I want it to be a little less legalese and a little more friendly voice, and it can rewrite the whole document for me. Similarly, in email, I can write a message about how, announcing that I just left the Broad Institute, and I can have it make a longer one for my family and make a shorter one for Twitter and a totally different one for LinkedIn. and I just kind of tell it what the message is, and it'll like write out these documents. And again, it's not going to be the final document that I'm going to post onto LinkedIn, but instead of me sitting there for 20 minutes with the little blinking cursor, like, what should I do? Well, now I have something I can work with right away. So that's kind of powerful. If I were to go into Google Slides, you'd see I could like generate images. Oh, I need a bunch of images of some computers that are interconnected to put onto this one part of my slide. And so boom, it'll generate 3 like AI generated images for me right off the bat. As I mentioned, if I'm a cloud practitioner and I'm like in the cloud trying to do stuff and I'm looking at these docs and I'm like, oh man, like what are all going on here in these docs? I have access to the chat interface right in the Google Docs console. So it can boil down like if there's like a 5-page document in there and I'm just looking for one little piece of information, instead of me having to scan the whole document, I can ask it the question that I have and it can bring back an answer right in context. I lost my connection here to the Cloud Shell, but similarly, like in the Cloud Shell or in the Cloud Console, no matter what I'm working with here, I can open this thing and find out like, what were the details that drove up my GCP charges last month? And it's going to look at my GCP bill and try to help explain to me like what happened. Or if it doesn't know how to access my actual bill, it'll say, oh, well, you go to the console and click on this link and run the report here. If I am a developer, let me change my view here slightly. And I'm in my actual code editor. Hide that. And so this is like me opening my actual code editor where I'm gonna like maybe write some code or something. And maybe what I want to do is I want to make a new Cloud Run instance or something of that nature. Oh, that's fun. Of course, it was logged in before I walked up to the podium, and now it's not logged in. Let's see if I can fix that. I have a few moments left anyway. But let's say, how do I create a new Python Cloud Run service that returns hello world? Because like I don't even know how to make a Cloud Run service, so I need at least to get some basics on how to get started here. So it gave me, basically, I think pretty much exactly what I would want. So I could just, make a new file here and call it main.py and paste in this and see if that is something that would run. But then, like, that's not everything you need in order to... Oh, I lost my Gemini. That's not everything you need. So, like, what other files do I need in the repo? To deploy this, because I think there's more in there than just the main.py file. And so luckily, this thing has context of what I'm working on. It can see the code that I have already here. If I was working in the company code base and I had like the big repo that I had opened, it has access to the content in that repo. And so if I say something like, oh, well, what's the normal function that I would use to call this particular API, like it can see the code that I'm actually working in. And one of the things you referenced earlier is the increasing size of that context window. It used to be like a year or two ago when I was trying to do the same thing, the amount of code it could have in its brain while it's processing my question was like about what I could have loaded in one file on the screen at one time. And now with this massive amount of huge context window that you have, I could have the entire code base that I'm working in there. And so it would be context aware of like everything that's going on. And so there's other places in Google Cloud where you can totally access Gemini. I only showed you several. I think we're right at the end of time though, so I want to stop here. We saw Vertex AI. I guess I'll just at least show what Gemini AI Studio is. Gemini AI Studio is like a combination of some of the things I just mentioned, where you have like sort of a code editing type experience, but you're going to be editing prompts, and you can kind of start building out your applications in there. I think I'll just wrap up the demo at that point.
Is there anything that you all want to see?
Yeah.
I have a general question for a lot of the people in this room who are probably less technical. Like one of the most fundamental places to start is like prompt editing or prompt engineering. Can you just share some generalized guidance, whether it's with any sort of AI or ML engine, like how people can come up to speed or sort of educate themselves about how to write thoughtful prompts?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think it's going to take some practice. So like, there's no way you can learn it without having a little of experience with it. And probably not just with one model, maybe using a few different ones to see like how they behave differently. The prompt that I wrote to generate this thing here, I didn't do, oh, that was fun. I didn't do any like prompt engineering on it. I just wrote it one time, hoping to see that I would get something useful back. Now, you'll find sometimes you write a prompt for something and like you didn't get back exactly what you wanted. So you go, oh, well, maybe I'll add another sentence to clarify this and another sentence to clarify that. I think people just hearing me say that is not sufficient compared to you having tried it for something yourself. One of the things that's kind of cool, I don't even remember if I'm allowed to show this or not. Let's see. It doesn't have a warning, so I'm going to show it. But when you start working with Gemini, the chat interface that consumers have available to them, and Google Workspace folks as well, you can build something that's like reusable and useful again later. So in a side project that I was working on, I have hundreds of ancient crossword puzzles that I'm trying to get into a database, and they're like photographs, they're JPEGs. And so I spent a little time in the Gemini chat interface, like trying to get it to extract all the clues from this image in JSON format. And I had to go back and forth with this thing a few times before it did what I wanted. But then I was like, great, now I have 800 of these. Like, I don't want to type this prompt every single time. So I can build like a gem, which is like a little widget that knows all the stuff that I just figured out inherently. And when I come to it and ask a question, it already has that context. So it knows that it's going to be an image, it's going to be a crossword puzzle, I'm going to have to get the clues and the instructions and everything and return JSON data. So this is really another way, like you could do something and then you could make a gem for that. Like I spent a little time talking to it about how to plan the trip to Vegas. Like I could make a gem where I'm just tell it which city and how many days, and it'll do all the things that we had talked about. It knows who my family is, it knows how many kids there are, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you have a question back there?
Yeah, I'm not even really sure how to formulate my question, but in the
We'll
context
prompt engineer it together.
I need to start from 101. In the context of business, I work with clients all the time that are large legacy companies. So it might be like a manufacturer that's like 100 years old, right? And they're always asking, like, we need AI, and their data is so old in so many places that that's always our first step. And I'm just curious about, any tools that exist where we could take something, with this level of capability, but put it in a walled environment of a business that's multimodal, right? So shipping invoices versus product information versus, all the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a little bit of the Vertex AI Studio earlier of like how there's these various model garden options and you can start piecing these things together. What you could basically do is like point this thing at the bolus of data that you have and train a model on that data in particular. And without really doing much other than pointing, like if you had all the data in a bucket, let's say, which I know you don't, but let's say it was in a bucket, you point it at the bucket and you say, go learn all the stuff that's going on in this bucket, and you give it a little time to process, and at the end, you now have a chat interface that knows whatever was in there. So you can say like, do we have any contracts with this company? And it'll look through however many million documents you have to see if you do. Like, what's the common language that we usually have in contracts about this topic? And it'll give you like 3 examples from in your actual data. So that's very easy to do with these tools. It's not really like a software engineering task exactly. Like you can kind of piece it together with typing English and using the the web interface and whatnot. Certainly, software engineers can also like leverage these things at scale. But that's basically what you would do. You would give it what data you want. You would give it a sort of like you saw in the demo. It would be like, you are a company like agent. Your job is to answer smart questions about what's in this data set only. And if you don't find it in there, don't answer. Suddenly, that's how it will behave when people talk to it.
The other related to that, is the quality of the data and the connectivity between the data, that it's slightly differently worded, formatted, whatever. Is it possible to use these tools to also solve for that problem?
I mean, that's one of the things, like if you think about before we had the AI, if I used whatever the common technology at the time to make it searchable or indexable, it would search for like the words that are in the documents. And so if I search for my string in quotes, and there's another way of saying the same thing, it wouldn't find those necessarily. But this thing understands like sort of the context of what you're saying and the meaning. So it'll find, 10 different ways of saying the same thing, different from the way you said it, but the meaning is essentially the same. And so that, I think, makes it much easier to mine through that data. I mean, if I were doing a project like that, I would throw all the data in there because you don't know what's in there yet. You haven't made sense of it, and start asking questions about it. That's how you build like your plan of like, what will the structure of this data be once we have made sense of it? Like, you're going to talk to the data through a bot of some sort that knows all the data. You couldn't have possibly read it all yourself, but the bot can. So that makes that job much easier.
Does that mean we don't have to even structure our data anymore? Just dump it all in an unstructured manner?
I mean, I wouldn't say that. Like, I think what I'm describing is the fact that we have a lot of old data that wasn't structured because we didn't even have that like language to talk about it when we were creating it. So for that data, you're going to put it in there and try to eventually make sense of it. If you're like designing new systems at scale, you're going to still want to put some thought into data design, and you don't want to make it harder for the computer tools to help you solve the problem. So structured data is going to be better. You can train a model on like the literal columns and explain what each column means instead of having it read a bunch of like documents from Word that it's trying to make sense of. Structured data is going to give you better results.
We'll take one more question.
Aditi, this might be for you. So you started off saying a lot of the same business rules apply. Because this is HBS, one of them is, innovator's dilemma. I'm curious if Gemini's strategy.
Someone was going to bring that up.
Yeah, is the strategy different given the sort of legacy search business you're trying to protect? And I'll say, I just typed in, find me a good lawyer after a truck accident in Boston. Perplexity and ChatGPT gave me recommendations. Google did not. Those are probably pretty expensive keywords. So I'm curious, internally, as you guys think about it, is there a different strategy given most of your revenue is still search?
I'm trying to figure out how to answer that.
We might not have the right person.
Yeah, it might not be the right person because I'm in engineering, right, to be able to answer that question for you. But I can point you in the direction and refer you to someone in Google who can. Is that a good answer?
Similar to what Gemini said.
On that note.
Thank you.